The two mercenaries walked the lonely road back, accompanied only by the night wind's wistful sigh. With the absence of a caravan, the road was much more tedious, quiet, and exposed. Elias couldn't help but eye his newfound companion with scrutiny. Did she know about the attack? Why did she not act? The golden-haired Alchieri shot him a look, her green eyes studying him in turn. Elias quickly looked away, facing forward and trying to focus on the gravel road before him. "Something on your mind, Thurlow?" Elias remained silent. His companion paused, her mouth moving fruitlessly, attempting to find some sort of absolution. The young man looked over at her, his brow furrowed. His companion continued to look at him with a look of both scrutiny as well as a slight softness that he'd yet to see. Her words stumbled out. "I was as terrified as you know. I was scared out of my mind, Elias Thurlow, so don't look at me like I'm some monster." Elias looked away, remaining quiet for a few moments before he decided to satisfy his own curiosity. "You know my name, sir. May I ask yours?" "Artia Le Chariel. You may call me Artia, if you wish." The young man brought himself to look back over at the now-named woman, who was, to his surprise, giving a weak but warm smile. He nodded slowly. "Okay, Artia. Now I know your name." The two fell silent for several more moments, before Elias spoke once more. "So, Artia, you act like a professional. How long have you been at this whole freelance mercenary work thing?" Artia, much to his surprise, laughed. I haven't been doing this for a terribly long time. I just happen to have a very sharp tongue, and a quick wit. The swords and bow are mostly for show." Elias's smile dropped slightly. "Well, I'm rather trained at this sort of thing," Artia quickly added. "My father trained me how to use the sword and bow rather well. I just haven't had to use them too much, is all I mean." The young man nodded. "Okay, fair. I've not had to use my sword a whole lot. Most of my work has involved finding misplaced things or chasing off drunks anyway." Artia smirked. "I've mostly had to dispose of pests. Big rats or half-starved wolves, you know the type." The boy mercenary gave a small nod. "I know the type." He furrowed his brow, realizing now that he was having a pleasant conversation with a dagger ear. Strange. "So who is this Lord Uzerai? Do you know much of him?" The woman shook her head. "Not much. I know that he is very powerful and that he makes deals with people on the mainland often, but not much else. I don't tend to trust Mulchieri lords." Elias grunted in response, finding himself falling back into his discomfort. He felt as though this woman knew more than she was letting on. They had just passed through the Fahenwood, he noted, which separated the unification from the untamed lands of the Humes. He looked between the trees and then stopped. He heard a rustling, not too far off. The Alchieri stopped in turn, her eyes scanning their surroundings. "I hear it as well. Footsteps, yes? They're not very sneaky. But that doesn't speak for their ferocity. Ready to use that blade, Sir Thurlow." Elias looked to the emerald-eyed woman. "Footfalls, yeah. What kind of footfalls, though?" Artia turned to Elias with a surprised look. "Human footfalls. No beast would blunder as such unless it was too large to avoid sneaking." She looked to the nearby woods. "Probably highwaymen. We can run and risk them not their pounce, or we can meet them with diplomacy and wit. Up to you, Elias." "I'd prefer the diplomacy bit," a voice said from behind the two. They turned to see a rather large, well-built man with studded leather armor and a crossbow slung over his shoulder. The man had a wide, smug grin on his face, surrounded by a thick goatee. His rather bushy eyebrows were raised wryly before his dark, short-cropped hair. "So what are you two carrying, I wonder? 100 crowns? 1,000 crowns?" Elias looked to Atia, hoping to find some wisdom in her eyes, but she responded with the same expression of panic and concern. She made a small gesture with her head eastward, away from the highwayman. Finding no salvation in his companion's eyes, Elias looked behind him the way the Achieri had gestured, and saw that there were yet more men clad in leather armor with crude weapons and dark cloth masks forming up in that direction as well. His panicked thoughts were broken by a loud laugh. The man who first spoke laughed for several moments, then wiped his eyes in an exaggerated motion. "There's nowhere to go from here, children. I'd personally recommend you hand over everything you're holding." He nodded his head at Atia. "And I'm feeling pleasant today, so I'll let you keep your clothes." He laughed again. The Achieri woman scowled, and she looked over at Elias once again. This time her expression was tempered by anger on top of panic. The moment of silence was broken again by the man in studded leather. "Oh, but I'm going to have to ask for your armor." He outstretched a hand. "Well, don't keep me waiting." Elias now turned to face the man. "With respect, sir, we need our weapons and armor to survive the road back. Crowns we can discuss, but..." The man held up a hand, chuckling. "I don't think you understand. Your safety is your problem, not mine. This is no discussion." He gave a wide smile. "I'm not asking. I'm demanding." The young mercenary shifted uncomfortably on his feet, slowly moving his hand to his sword. He had no desire to fight this out, but on the other hand, he had no intention of losing all the money that he had been given for this job. He stared at the man in studded leather who was waiting, expectantly, several paces in front of him. Looking to Atia again, he saw that she had a similar idea in mind. Several uncomfortable moments passed before Elias finally saw fit to draw his blade, and quickly stepped back a pace, turning on his heel and swinging at one of the masked bandits behind him. The man was ready, and parried his blade aside, attempting to strike Elias in the face with his left hand, but barely missing. Elias could see, from the corner of his eye, Atia drawing her blades and rushing the leader. He threw his weight into his shoulder, ramming the man in front of him, catching the man entirely off guard. The movement threw the bandit off of his feet and onto his back, but this promised no respite. A sharp pain was felt, and the mercenary looked down to see a crossbow bolt buried in his left shoulder. He looked to see Atia in what looked like a ferocious fight with the leader. With his sword arm free, Elias rushed the man who had just shot him. At this point, his actions were dictated almost entirely by fear, and all he could do, was attempt to stay alive. He swung his sword downward at the man, who slid back, letting the blow soar through the air fruitlessly. Before he could raise his blade back up, he saw a blur, and everything became fuzzy for a moment. He felt a blunt pain in his back, and he felt his body make contact with the cold ground. He heard the sound of something heavy hitting the ground beside him. Slowly his vision began to come back, and he turned his head to see the Achieri lying beside him, with the lead bandit on top of her, holding her right arm down with one leg, and the other arm with his right hand. With his left hand, he grabbed her sword from the ground, muttering under his breath. Atia was fighting the hard grip best she could, but to no avail. Elias looked to the defiant face of his unexpected ally and could only let out a weak groan. The leader of these highwaymen heard the hushed sound and turned to look at him, frustration marring his features. "This could have all been avoided, boy, but no! You had to go pissing me off." His angry gaze turned back to Atia. "And you! You soiled my good mood." The young man felt a boot on his chest. He turned his head up to see the one who the foot was connected to. Seeing the masked visage and the cruel eyes of a rather muscular bandit, The masked man chuckled.
Don't worry. We'll be gentle.
Before swinging what looked like a light club at Elias's face. Then all went black.